very good morning and good afternoon to wherever you are all. This is Akshay Kumar. I'm going to be the moderator for today's presentation. First, let me take the honor to thank you all for joining us today. I would like to request you to please mute your phones while the presentation session is on, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Request you all to key in your questions on the WebEx chat to the host. Your questions will be answered sequentially, and if we are unable to get to any questions due to lack of time, we will respond to them separately over an email over to you. So for today's agenda, I'm going to do an introduction to our presenter today, and we'll go through the details about Mastercard, their environment, the challenges that they have been through due to the data growth, the alternatives that were considered, and the benefits that they have seen, the lessons learned during the whole journey, and the recommendation that Joe has for us. So we are very pleased to have Joe Kalia over here on the phone presenting this session. Joe is a senior business leader and a vice president of software development working on core technologies at Mastercard. He has an extensive experience, started with Mastercard in 2001 as a senior developer and spent about 10 years working in various aspects of Oracle e-business suite development team at Mastercard, including the overall team management. Worked for 7 years prior to joining Mastercard in technology and finance. So that's a brief introduction on Joe. Joe, I pass it on over to you to take us forward through the journey of Mastercard in managing or taming the data growth. Over to you, Joe.
Well, thank you, Akshay. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those listening. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to go through this information with us. So as Akshay mentioned, I'm Joe Kalia with Mastercard Worldwide, and I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are aware or have heard of Mastercard, but obviously you may not know exactly what we do. Mastercard, as you can see from the bullets on the screen, probably the most important point is the second bullet, which shows that we are a technology-driven global payments company. So while you may see Mastercard on the Mastercard logo on your credit debit cards, as well as on the POS terminals that you pay or on your e-commerce websites that you're shopping on, I think probably one of the most important things to know is that with Mastercard, we are basically the link between customers or consumers, financial institutions, for millions of businesses and merchants around the world. We do operate in over 210 countries worldwide. And so, again, we are a brand and a technology global payments company. So with that, Akshay, the next slide, please. With regards to the Oracle e-business suite that we have here at Mastercard, consists of a single global instance. We have a single chart of accounts, which is used by Mastercard personnel all around the world. So everywhere we have offices, we do have the ability for folks all over the world to log into our application. Any of our Mastercard employees or contractors can log in and utilize various services within the Oracle e-business suite. More of the applications that are oftentimes used are things like the internet expenses and self-service purchasing and things like that, but we do obviously have a lot of core financial functions that are used as well. From an architecture perspective, the Oracle database we're currently running on is a version 11.2.0.3. We have done a very good job of keeping up with all of the various updates that Oracle puts out over the years for the Oracle database, and that's very important to us, as well as the application suite itself, which is on version 11.5.10. Again, we stay very close to the various Oracle versions that are out there, with our sights set on upgrading to version R12 here in the near future. So we do run Both the application and databases are running on Oracle hardware with full replication to our disaster recovery sites so that we are fully prepared for any kind of a disaster that may come. Next slide, please. Akshay, can you change slide, please? Thank you. We did implement Oracle E-Business Suite back in 2000, and since then we have continued to see significant growth within our Oracle E-Business Suite. The overall growth itself comes from a number of different areas. We see just general generic growth, which comes from our month-to-month, month-end processing, quarter-end processing, year-end processing, as I'm sure most Oracle E-Business Suite users are seeing. The data growth concerns really come from a multitude of areas. Again, the continued growth that's very sustainable and very normal to our environment we see, so we can very easily predict out what that growth is going to be like many years out in the future. If we look at any kind of mergers or acquisitions, we can see too what the impact of those may have on our environment. We look at things like cost, the cost of storage. Are there things that we need to be cognizant of when we look at storage costs, maybe not just the cost of disks, but changing arrays? Overall performance, does the month-over-month changes or the delta in that data growth have an impact to our performance overall? We also have to be cognizant of data retention policies. And how prevalent are those with what we have within the Oracle E-Business Suite. We'll talk more about data retention in the coming slides, but again, that's something that we need to keep our eye on and ensure that we have the appropriate level of data within our database, within our footprint and our production environment, as well as just ensuring that we're meeting any kind of stringent government guidelines. So the next slide, please. So what happens when you look at challenges for data growth? Application performance, that's always something we look very closely at. Again, as I mentioned before, single global instance that's used by our Oracle E-Business Suite users around the world. That could really come into a multitude of issues when you start talking about performance. The larger the database size is, obviously that will impact your performance. In looking at some of our smaller regional offices that may not have a very large connectivity back to our central office and back to the central global instance that we have, there's always concerns around performance. So something we wanted to watch very closely and manage very closely and very tightly. We looked at various things like upgrading our hardware, getting faster hardware, but that's something that we would have to look at on a regular basis, and it would be something we would have to sustain every 2 to 3 years to ensure that we had the fastest hardware so that our users were receiving or were seeing good performance as they were connecting to the Oracle E-Business Suite here at Mastercard. That faster hardware is always an expensive solution. Even though hardware costs have come down over the years, when you start talking about replication and the overall size of the data growth patterns, that did become an expensive solution. So while we do maintain a good solid hardware platform, we knew that hardware wasn't going to be the exact way to manage what we're doing with data growth. Increased network throughput, again, something that we would continue to implement and monitor, but we knew that wasn't going to be the magic switch that was going to allow us to continue to manage a high-performing environment. And then we looked at managing our data footprint. That could come in any way, any number of options, including looking at things like database analysis and performance improvements. Some of those we could see some improvements out of, but oftentimes the overall data and the size of the data didn't really accommodate some of the performance tuning that we're looking to do, and we did press on our DBA staff, who's done a fantastic job over the years of keeping the database performing as well as possible. So we knew we would have to work on managing that footprint, looking at other alternatives like archiving and purging of the data at some point in the future to be able to ensure that we had the right amount of data to meet the things that I had mentioned over time. We also needed to take a look at additional best practices to manage data growth. What else is out there in the marketplace? What else could we do? Were there some things that we were missing? We did have conversations Over time, with groups like Gartner and Forrester talking about what are other groups doing, we would bring the Oracle support teams in and the account reps in on a regular basis to look at our environment and to talk about how are we set up compared to other companies who have similar data footprints as to what we have. So that was always something that we did as well, is look at best practices, see if there's anything else that we could do that was cost effective but still help us maintain that data footprint. All right, next slide, please. So when we look at the impact of data growth, again, what comes to mind? Storage obviously became a challenge, not only from the size but the complexity of the way we have the storage set up. We obviously wanted to have a high-performing storage array. We wanted to be able to make good use of, again, best practices in the industry for any kind of replication that we may need to various environments like a disaster recovery environment or various testing environments. And so when you look at that within the Oracle E-Business Suite environment, it brings to mind several challenges, and of those are how do you make your storage arrays work across those challenges. We also looked at things like application upgrade timing. We, being a 24/7 shop here at Mastercard, we wanted to make sure that we were minimizing the impact to any of our internal users as much as possible. And we knew we had a narrow window to do those application database upgrades, so we had to take that into account and ensure that the overall size of the database wasn't our ability to be able to complete those upgrades in time so that we did not impact our customers or impacted them as minimally as possible. Some of the additional considerations around monitoring is just the overall planning of the data growth. Again, it was sustainable. We knew exactly where we were going over the coming years, and so we had to plan that out and work with our enterprise storage groups to ensure that they were prepared in the coming years to support the overall data growth plans that we have. Next slide. So when you look at alternatives, what were some things that we could do? Again, taking some advice from Oracle, from Forrester, from Gartner, and sitting in on other OAUG conferences and talking to other folks that are part of the OAUG, we looked at things like custom archiving and purging solutions. Do we just continue to upgrade our storage arrays and just let the storage team handle it? Do we, again, talk about database tuning? Is there a way that we could use database tuning to continue to improve the performance that we were seeing based on the planned data growth? What else does Oracle have to provide to us? What is something that they could do to help us out with? And then what did the archiving marketplace look like? What is out there? What's available to us that maybe not directly through Oracle, but what could a third-party provider help us with to manage the overall data growth and the data footprint that we have here, or we had here at Mastercard? Next slide. So the ones we really started looking at very closely was custom archiving solution. We had our DBA team go through and do a fairly detailed estimate on what it would cost to build that. Not only build it, but maintain it. It was going to be costly to build it. We knew that anything we did initially was going to have a cost to it. We were obviously watching ROI very closely to see what was going to be the return on our investment. When you talk about a custom archiving solution, it's not just the building, but it's the maintaining of it. Any type of an archiving solution is going to need to be maintained. You have to be able to manage it from month to month, from quarter to quarter, and from year to year. And when we stacked up those monthly and quarterly and yearly maintenance costs, we realized that a custom archiving solution probably wasn't the best solution for us. Here at Mastercard, we have a number of other customized applications that we do have our own custom archiving solutions already in place and have had for many years. So we're actually pretty good at custom archiving solutions, but we knew, based on the complexities of the Oracle E-Business Suite, that a custom archiving solution just wasn't the right thing for us. We knew we could continue to improve our storage arrays. Again, our enterprise storage groups have done a fantastic job of keeping us on some of the latest and greatest hardware and also keeping costs down as much as possible. But again, over time, that was going to continue to get costly, especially when you talk about data growth rates. As Mastercard as a whole continued to grow and our data footprint continued to grow, X number of years into the future, it was very easy to predict where we'd be at 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And we knew that those growth patterns were not sustainable, and it didn't make any sense from a cost perspective to continue to maintain that data, even using the advanced storage array capabilities that we had at our disposal. Again, database tuning, while the database team has done a fantastic job, it was providing little relief. I think based on the overall expertise that we had in the house, in addition to what Oracle has provided to us in the way of recommendations, I think we had gotten about as much as we were going to get out of database tuning. So we knew that those were the extent of the alternatives that we had based on the research that we had done over time. Next slide. So we had to look at a strategy. What were we going to do to be able to address this problem? We knew it wasn't something that we had to take a knee-jerk reaction on. We did it very methodically. We looked at things. Again, we did our research. We went out to the industry. We talked to Forrester. We talked to Gartner. Went through and talked to other companies at OAUG, at the meetings and various marketplaces, looking at different options. And what we came down to is we knew we needed to purchase a package solution, an application or a third-party solution that would work and really focused on the Oracle e-business suite. But if we're going to purchase a package solution, we also wanted it to work across other applications at Mastercard as well, or at least be available for other applications to work with. We do have a number of other packaged applications here at Mastercard, other Oracle applications that we purchased from them, as well as other applications that have been custom developed here at Mastercard. So we wanted to at least have a tool available so that if any of the other applications here at Mastercard who have a structured data wanted to use an archiving solution, they could use the one that we were going to purchase. So it wasn't just a point solution. It was an enterprise class solution that we were looking at. As part of that strategy, we needed to identify an implementation plan. How are we going to implement it? Again, when you talk about a point solution versus an enterprise solution, what's the difference in hardware that you need to install the archiving solution on to make it work and make it industrial strength? We needed to ensure that all the teams who were engaged, our business partners, our development teams, our support teams, our infrastructure teams, our hardware teams, all those teams were engaged or needed to be engaged and understood what our plans were, so that when we went out to the marketplace and started looking for the right solution, we wanted to make sure that they were part of those discussions so that they had a say in what we were purchasing as well. We also had to just really look at reducing the footprint in our non-production instances as well. So it wasn't just a matter of looking at production in our disaster recovery environment, but what else could we do or what could we purchase that may have a positive impact on our non-production environment? I'm sure many of you out there who use Oracle e-business suites have more than one non-production instance. And if you do, many of you, I've heard stories of people having hundreds of instances of the Oracle e-business suite. How do you manage that level of data, especially if you take one-for-one copies from production to your non-production instances? How do you manage that data growth across all those instances, especially if you have a large data footprint? And then just the overall maintenance of something long-term. Again, if we have to implement archiving and eventually purging out of data, how do we manage that solution long-term? Is it something that, again, if you look back at the custom solution, a customized archiving solution that we had done some research on, what's the cost of maintaining that versus the cost of purchasing a packaged solution from a third-party vendor? So these are all things that went into the strategy as we spent several years looking at this and analyzing it and talking to various folks in the marketplace. Okay, next slide. So then, when it comes time to invest, what are we doing? What are we getting for the money we're going to invest? What's the requirements? What's the the level of money we're looking at, and what's the benefit for the cost that we're going to expense? What's the ROI? We had a lot of questions. Our purchasing group, they had a lot of questions. Upper management, they had a lot of questions. When you look at an archiving solution, this is a necessary evil. It's one of those things that you don't necessarily want to add more complexity to your environment, but by keeping the data there in the environment and keeping that footprint growing at the same growth rate month after month, year after year, you're naturally adding that complexity to the environment. So when we looked at this overall, we had to ask ourselves some of these tough questions. Again, when we look at reducing the production database size, how is that going to impact when it comes time to upgrade our application to version R12 and R13 and Fusion and all the future versions that are coming out there? I think all of us know that an application upgrade is not necessarily the easiest thing to go through in the world. And when you have a very large data footprint, it makes it even more complicated. It takes longer to complete those upgrades. Upgrades like the R12 upgrade will obviously increase the size of your database overall with the data structure changes. So all these things had to be taken into account when we're looking at investments. And again, if we had our own customized archiving solution, what would be the impact of the R12 upgrade on that? If we just let things grow the way they continue to grow organically, what's the impact of that to the R12 upgrade? So all things we had to take into account. Wanted to reduce the need to ask for additional disk space. Again, over time, when you look at overall costs, we compared the costs of 3, 5, and 10-year disk upgrades and continual additions to disk space and managing the complexities of all that, new arrays, changes in the market, changes in the platforms and the arrays that are out there. All those had to be taken into account and look at the growth patterns that we were seeing and look at the cost it was going to incur, the Mastercard was going to incur by continuing to just grow normally based on the growth patterns we saw and the overall cost for all that growth. So again, it was easy for us to map out what the costs were going to be long term and then look at a package solution and be able to compare those costs and really come up with a good business case to justify what we thought we needed to do. Again, one of the necessary evils is your ILM groups, your information lifecycle management, the teams who are responsible for holding us accountable for making sure that we have the right level of data in our environments so that when we do implement certain data retention policies, do we have the flexibility to be able to archive off certain data sets but not others, hold on to certain data sets for certain periods of time, archive off versus purge off data. All these are things that the information lifecycle management team is very interested in, and they want to know, do we have those capabilities in place to be able to manage to the expectations of an ILM team as well as the overall data retention policies that Mastercard has in place. Equally important is changes to those retention policies. What happens when, through various legal measures or changes in company policy, do we have the flexibility to be able to change our archiving and purging solution quickly to be able to match up to those changes in those policies? There's also, we wanted to look at, from an investing perspective, what are some of the other unrealized gains, or what are some things that we may get out of it as a side benefit? So again, it's just not just the reduction of your production data footprint, your disaster recovery data footprint, but also other things like non-production. Does the tool provide us with any capabilities to reduce our non-production environment? Again, getting back to those companies that have multiple 10s, 20s, and upwards of 100 or more copies of their production environment and a non-production environment. How do you manage that efficiently when your data footprint is so large? Also, just looking at the incremental performance improvements that you gain. Maybe it's at the end user workstation. Maybe it's in how quickly you can complete a database or an application upgrade so that you minimize the impact to your customers overall. Those are all things we need to take into account. Another unrealized gain is masking. The Solix tool provides capabilities to us, while we haven't implemented them yet, for masking of our non-production environments for managing sensitive data. So these are all things that potentially will be unrealized gains for us as we continue down the archiving road. Next slide. So what to consider? Again, Mastercard went and completed a full-blown request for proposal. We went out in the marketplace. We reviewed various options that were available to us. We looked for different companies, again, talking to the Gartners and the Forresters of the world, talking to other companies who have done archiving, talking to companies who have looked at archiving but then have walked away from it and have chose to go other routes of just continue to manage their growth. But we really spent a lot of time, multiple years, looking at what's available. What could we do that was the most cost-efficient opportunity for us? We reviewed the major players in the space, and again, over the years, those players changed a lot. We saw a lot of consolidation of smaller companies were being purchased by larger companies. Some of the other players, I think there may have even been a few of the applications that were out there kind of disappeared over time. So we wanted to use a scoring approach, and based on what we were looking for from an enterprise solution, we scored all the different companies and third-party products that came into the RFP process. And so based on that, we came up with a couple of top providers that we thought were going to be the best solution for Mastercard. Next slide, please. So once we identified what we thought was the best solution for Mastercard, then the next thing we did is we looked at planning out the project. You know, what were we going to do? So when you look at things like lessons learned, as we look back over the project now, what could we have done differently? Project and resource planning. You know, hindsight's always 20/20. So when you go back and you look at a project, even if a project went very well, there's always things you can learn from that project. And this was the first time, obviously, Mastercard had gone through and implemented a packaged archiving solution onto a large, complex set of packaged applications like the Oracle E-Business Suite. So there were some things that we learned just looking at project and resource planning. We needed to make sure that the alignment was there between Mastercard and the vendor. When you look at application capabilities and roadmap needs, you want to make sure those are aligned and planned out from a long-term perspective. You know, what are the goals that you're trying to accomplish? What are you trying to get done with this application? And make sure those align with what the vendor's capable of doing, and making sure that what you purchased matches back to what you were looking to get out of the tool. Again, not just short-term, but from a long-term perspective. Yes, it may satisfy the need short-term for archiving, but maybe it doesn't fit other needs that you're looking for. We also wanted, again, buy-in from our teams, including our business team. It's critical for success that all the teams get engaged in this. Again, you start talking about the complexities of the environment. It's not just the complexity of the e-business suite, but it's the complexity of all the teams it takes to support it. When you look at your infrastructure teams, your architecture teams, your development teams, your support teams, your business teams, all these players, all these groups have to be engaged and have their requirements and expectations out there so that when the solution does get implemented, it's implemented in such a way that it meets the needs of the providers. And again, an archiving solution is, to a certain degree, a necessary evil. You have business teams who may not want to get rid of the data. They may need the data beyond what the ILM dictates from a data retention perspective. You have the ILM teams who are keeping a very close watch on how much data are we keeping in the environment. You have architecture and infrastructure teams that are asking the question, why do we need to have this much data in the environment? Why can't we just get down to a couple of years' worth of data? Can any business value be made from data that's 10, 12, 15 years old? These are all things that we went through and we asked those questions, but looking back on the project, I think there's some things that even we learned that we could have done differently to have been even more successful with the implementation of this solution. So again, lessons learned, there's a lot of things out there, and even if you look out in the marketplace, as if you're looking at an archiving solution, as you're doing your research, talk about lessons learned to the companies who have purchased any kind of a solution or if they've created their own customized solution, because again, those lessons are important, and if somebody's already gone across those pitfalls and you can take advantage of their learnings, do that. Again, we had a fairly smooth implementation here. I think in the end we're happy with what we have. But overall, there's always been lessons learned, and those will make a successful project even more successful. Next slide, please. So beyond that, from a recommendations perspective, when you're working with the vendors, plan out what does the short and long-term project look like. Come up with a formulation or a plan for success. And again, all parties have to buy in on that. Have your key stakeholders in those meetings up front, making sure that expectations are understood, making sure that requirements are understood, making sure that everybody knows why. There's always discussions around, and we continue to have those here. Why do we have to have this tool in place? It makes a very complicated environment even more complicated. There's always the cost aspect of it. Again, when you go back and you look at your organic growth or planned growth needs from a mergers and acquisitions perspective, and you align that along with your organic growth, what does that mean for your environment over time? Does it make sense to do this now? Does it make sense to maybe wait a little bit? When you look at things like upcoming projects and upgrades, again, you're going to see the opportunity to potentially save some time on a significantly sized upgrade like an R12 upgrade if you have the capability to implement something that's going to reduce or manage the size of your data footprint. It could mean the difference between completing your upgrade in a weekend and not really impacting your business teams for the most part versus starting on a Friday morning and not completing your implementation of the R12 upgrade until maybe Monday night or Tuesday morning. And for those teams who are impacted on those couple of days, that's a big deal. So knowing those expectations and having those requirements in place ahead of time is very important. But again, working with the vendor to come up with a plan or a formula for success, that's huge. And if you can work with the team and get that done and get that accomplished using what they've learned and using what other companies have learned, it's going to pay in dividends well into the future. And also really managing the expectations. Again, the business team, when you look at planning out milestones, they may have different expectations than the technical teams do or than the infrastructure teams do. That all needs to be spelled out and clarified, because if it's not, and if the expectations from one team are very different from the other teams, it's going to cause problems for the project. And I'm sure all of you have seen this before in other projects that you've run. If expectations aren't aligned, then it puts lots of pressure on the milestones, and people and teams start to ask the question, why are we doing this and why do we have to have these milestones? And it can make a very efficient plan run very inefficiently. Keep all support teams fully engaged. I think that's one thing that we may have dropped the ball on a little bit when we did ours. The storage teams, the folks who manage your storage arrays and all your disk mappings and all that, they need to be fully engaged with these type of archiving projects, especially when you start to look at any impact to your production versus your non-production versus your disaster recovery environments. You need to be fully engaged with those teams and make sure that they understand what the plans are across the entire project, but then long-term. They may have some other thoughts on ways to improve the process for the project, maybe changes to the milestones, and even looking, again, long-term. We as a development team don't always know what the plans are, what the technology is that's coming out 2, 3, 5 years from now. And so there may be some significant changes that need to be made in the way that an archiving tool is implemented to make use of those changing technologies that are coming out in the near future. And then last but not least, I would say just work with the vendor support teams. One of the things that we did was we had some discussions with other companies who had bought into the product, and we were very interested to see what was their thoughts on support. As you work with packaged applications, some of the successes you'll see is when a vendor has a strong support team, and oftentimes some of the failures you'll see is when that support team isn't so strong, and they're not able to provide you with those good solid resources that you need to be able to answer a lot of the questions that your technical teams or your support teams internally to your company have. And so if you have a vendor who has a strong support team and who are there to assist you in the problems that you have, that can become critical to the success of a project. One of the things we often look at is those support teams and ensuring that are they available when they say they're going to be? Are they interested in making Mastercard successful in using this application? Are they going to have a vested interest in what we're trying to do? And if not, then you have to question what you're doing, because at the end of the day, if they're not willing to help you be successful, then you're going to struggle with that success. And I can tell you that is an important role that vendor plays. And fortunately, we've seen the success of having the vendor step up, but I've also been on the other end of that spectrum where the vendor wasn't willing to step up, and it does make a project that much more challenging. So when you look at all these types of projects in total, it really comes down to where are all the groups willing to partner up. Does that vendor have a tool that will do what it says or what they say it can? And when you do have problems, because let's be honest, everybody's going to have problems. No software is perfect. But when you do have those problems, will the vendor be there to support you? So I think that concludes the majority of the slides that we had. Akshay, is it time to open up for questions?
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you very much for giving a great detailed overview on your journey through the process of taming the data growth at Mastercard. Now, we are open to take any questions, and I'd like to request all the participants to please key in their questions to the host to be answered sequentially. And please note that any responses which are not within the permissible limits of communication from Mastercard may not be answered, with all due respect to the questionnaire. So I'll request any questions that you have, please type into the chat box, and we'll have Joe answer them sequentially.
Right. While we're waiting for questions, I will say, as Akshay mentioned, that certain specific questions about our project and our overall way we have our environment set up, I may not be at liberty to ask or to answer, but I will do the best I can to answer any questions that come up like that. So, in the meanwhile, we get any questions. Joe, I think all the attendees over there would be keen to understand what kind of a performance improvement you have seen as a result of archiving. You want to provide some additional insights onto it? Sure, absolutely. So we have seen some performance improvements. I think one of the biggest things that we're focusing on right now, again, is going back and looking at our R12 upgrade. When we've gone through previous application upgrades in the past, they're very, very lengthy. And again, with being a global company, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have users outside the U.S. who are working late into the night on Friday evenings, and we have other users on the other side of the world that may be coming online with us on Sunday afternoon our time. So it limits the amount of time that we have to complete an upgrade, and again, an upgrade the size of R12 is significant. We wanted to make sure that when we look at the upgrade itself, how are we going to reduce the overall time frames so that we minimize the impact to our customers? And obviously one of the first things that came to mind is there an opportunity to reduce the size of our data footprint in our production environment? So that's one thing that we've been able to do, is we have gone through and we've implemented the archiving solution into production. We are still in the process of archiving off some of that data. We've had a few struggles, to be honest, but I think we've gotten some pretty good support from the Solix team from that perspective, so we continue to work with them as we see problems here and there, and they've worked with us to get some of those problems resolved, which is good. We've got a few things that we're working with them on right now, so we're looking forward to getting those things resolved. From a performance perspective, again, when we look at the performance of the data, we're on a very, very healthy set of hardware. Our hardware teams have done a great job. Our disk infrastructure teams have done an amazing job of managing all that. So even, and then as well as our database teams, they have done a great job in managing the overall performance of the way the database performs regardless of the size. And Oracle is an engine that allows us to significantly increase the data overall without seeing a tremendous hit to performance. So overall, from a day-to-day operations perspective, I don't know that we've seen a tremendous improvement overall in performance. I would say we're focused, again, more on that R12 upgrade. In fact, we've even seen a couple situations, which I believe we're working with Solix on right now, looking at merged views across our archive data versus our the live production data. We've struggled with that a little bit, quite honestly. But again, we have a significant amount of data that's crossing both those views, and as we look to implement purging at some point in the future, we expect to see some of those performance areas improve quite a bit. Again, when we really haven't gotten rid of any data yet per se, it's more been segregating the data from the currently used data over the last few years to the more stale data that isn't referenced as often from a number of years ago. So again, if you're looking at the more current data, we know that the data footprint is now much smaller. From a disk perspective, we haven't given up any disk space yet, but what that means is as we go to grow our data footprint over the coming months and years, and then especially with the R12 upgrade, we're not looking to have to add disk space to our production environment. We feel that we're going to have enough disk space to keep going for some time into the future. So I know that was kind of a lengthy answer to the performance question, but again, I think you have to be cognizant of exactly what you're looking for. If you have a slower performing environment that may require some tuning, or if you have an environment that may be on a little less substantial hardware, you may see a better improvement or a larger improvement in performance overall in your day-to-day activity within the environment. But I think we had such a well-tuned environment at that point that there wasn't much room to grow from a performance perspective. Again, lots of solid hardware and great leadership by the technical teams at Mastercard have kept us kind of on the cutting edge of tuning overall.
Thank you, Joe. We have another question coming in. The question is, what other products did you consider before selecting this solution?
We looked at a number of products. There was an HP product that was out there, and it's been several years since we completed the RFP, so I've kind of forgotten some of the names. We looked at IBM's solution. We looked at Applimation as a solution, and there were a couple of other key providers as well that we looked at. Many of the providers offered very, very solid products. We were looking for a diverse product that would, again, not just focused on the Oracle E-Business Suite, but also we could utilize for other applications across Mastercard. There were, I would say, probably our top other choices would have been Applimation was a strong contender, but we saw it was very, very focused on Oracle E-Business Suite, and we struggled a little bit with how could we apply it across the rest of the enterprise. HP had acquired a tool that we liked, but there were certain flaws in that we saw. IBM was probably the second strongest contender next to Solix. Again, very, very good tools, all of them. There were just certain features and functionality of Solix that we liked a little bit more over some of the other tools, and it was a very narrow gap, I'll be honest. Solix has a very good tool. And their implementation team, their sales team was very effective. We continue to work with them, again, to the support teams and the implementation teams as we continue to implement more and more of the Solix solution here at Mastercard. But overall, there was a fairly narrow gap, and we looked at things like a proof of technologies and a proof of concept. And those kind of helped define our decision on exactly which direction we would lean, and we ended up moving towards Solix But again, the IBM solution was a very good solution as well.
Thank you, Joe. The next question we have is, what was the size of your database before and after archiving?
I'm not at liberty to say the size of it. I can tell you that, and again, it's been several years since I've been on the Oracle eBusiness Suite development team. It's my understanding that we've reduced somewhere in the neighborhood of about a third the size of our live production database and moved all that data over into an archive database. So what that means then is we now have growth organically in that live database should we decide to grow it more. But obviously with having an archiving solution in place, that allows us to continue to stay at that level of data by using the dynamic, the EDMS engine within Solix to keep a standard set of rules running on a regular, I believe we archive monthly, to pull the data out of the database, out of the live database, and move that into the archive database. Again, we haven't started purging yet, and at some point in the future, I'm sure we will, which will then decrease the overall size of our entire data footprint. But it's my understanding we have reduced somewhere around the neighborhood of about a third of our original database and moved that out of the production database. So again, looking at R12, I keep on going back to that because that's something that's on our horizon. I think everybody's aware that when you do or complete the upgrade to R12, you're going to just naturally increase the size of your database. And so with that, by performing this archiving, it now allows us to grow that data in the database due to the R12 upgrade and not have to add additional disk space on, which is something that I think our enterprise storage team is fairly happy about.
Thanks, Joe. We also have a question where the attendees would like to understand which were the modules that were considered for archiving.
It's interesting because we came from a couple different approaches on this. The first approach was from a data retention perspective. Remove every bit of data that's older than X number of years old. However, our business teams weren't really on board with that. So there were a lot of discussions with the ILM team to look at the data retention policies and does that fit the needs of our business teams? Can the business teams live without the data that's X number of years old? Which again becomes your differentiator between do you just archive or do you archive and purge? Do you have a two-step process or really a three-step process where your more current data resides in your live database, you have X amount of years worth of data in your archive database, and then anything beyond that gets purged out of the system altogether. So there was that perspective of it, and then we also looked at it from a disk perspective. How do we reduce the size of the footprint overall, just from a sizing viewpoint? So that was really one of the first things we did. We decided to look at it from a sizing perspective, and so from that, we went in and Solix looked at our database, and they provided us with some scripts and worked with our DBA team to look at what were the top tables and modules that were using a significant amount of space within our database. And taking that information, working with our business team, those were some of the modules that we targeted. So, again, I'm not real close to the details anymore, so I'm not exactly sure which ones we have gone through and completed the archiving on or have archiving scripts set up. I know we're working with Solix right now. We're doing some AP and PO archiving. We're running into a couple of issues with that, but again, I understand we're in very close contact with the Solix team and working to get those issues resolved.
Thanks, Joe. We're still waiting for some additional questions. In the meanwhile, let me also just kind of try and have some more insights. I know you have already given enough data points on the upgrades and the kind of requirements that are typically one would see from a perspective of a Release 12 upgrade. How do you think is archiving going to help Mastercard for future upgrades, and what is the impact that you see on the storage as a result of archiving?
So, it's a very interesting question because, again, archiving being a necessary evil, it's one of those things that your policy groups and your life cycle management groups, they want to have in place so that they can enforce policies. However, your business teams likely don't want to give up that data. Some of your legal teams probably want you to get rid of that data. And your architecture teams, like your storage teams and whatnot, want to simplify the environments as much as possible so they can manage a very cost-effective environment. So, as we look to all those different things and we look to the overall cost, I think that what we look at in the future with regards to upgrades, I think the expectation with what we're seeing from Oracle's R12 upgrade is going to be the pattern for the future. I don't see a reduction in the complexity of the e-business suite environment overall. When you look toward things like Fusion and being able to migrate in other applications, other Oracle-based applications or Oracle-owned applications, it's going to further complicate your environment. If you have a PeopleSoft or a JD Edwards, for those companies who have multiple ERP systems that are all from Oracle, if you go to a Fusion environment, those tend to be even more complicated, more complex environments to manage. And with that, it's not likely that you can scale down the size of the environment while you're increasing the complexity. So with that, I think overall there's going to be the need to continue to archive, and for Mastercard at some point the need to purge some of that data out and keep a fairly clean environment. There's always going to be that push-pull relationship, again, of the technology teams and maybe some of the legal teams wanting to reduce the size and complexity of the environment versus the business teams who want to retain that data so they can work on those very important metrics, the trending analysis, and looking at things historically to see where we've been so we can map out where we think we're going to go into the future. So those are all very important things, and that, again, will become a dynamic of this environment and trying to understand how do we best manage the data footprint. So, again, I think when we look at application upgrades, even database upgrades, database upgrades, when you look at regression testing needs, can become very critical, and they can become very time-consuming. And Oracle does start to provide you with tools such as virtual grids, and you start looking at things like Exadata, things like that will make database upgrades easier. But again, you're still talking about potentially a very, very lengthy upgrade and a costly upgrade. And the more complex an environment is, I don't care what anybody says, the more complex it is, the more that upgrade is going to cost you. And if you can reduce the complexity by reducing your data footprint, I think there's a strong argument to be made that it's going to cost you it's going to save you in the long run if you can reduce the size of that footprint overall.
All right. We have a question coming in. The question is, are you currently using Discoverer to run reports against archived database?
We, again, I'll be able to answer this at a high level, so my apologies, and part of it is again because I've been removed from the environment for several years, or from the development team for a couple of years now, but we do utilize Discover here at Mastercard. Before I left, or before I moved off the team to take over other responsibilities, there were plans to be able to utilize Discover against both our live database as well as the archive database, and based on some proof of technologies that we did with Solix, the capabilities were there, they existed, they were real, and it was something that we knew we could use. I honestly cannot answer, or I don't really know whether we're using that today or not. I just know that the technology did exist, and it was something that we were looking to do when the project first kicked off a couple of years ago.
Right, thank you. So as we are entering into the last leg of our presentation session, please feel free to send your questions to the host. We'll wait for a few more seconds, maybe about like 5-10 seconds in all, before we get into the wrap-up section. So I see no questions coming in at this point of time. So I'd like to wrap up the session. I would like to first thank all of you for joining this presentation, and a special thanks to Joe for taking us through this insightful journey of your archiving implementation. And for all of you listeners over there, this presentation will also be mailed out to you, and this will also be available on Solix's website in the next few days to download and review it later if you want to listen through the presentation again. Thank you all, and have a very wonderful and a nice day ahead. Take care of yourself.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Joe.